I never planned to work at an amusement park, much less one that had no visitors. But life has a strange way of pushing you into places you'd never expect. It started with a Craigslist ad. Night security needed for abandoned amusement park. Easy work, $20 per hour, no prior experience required. I was broke and desperate, so I applied without much thought. Within a day, I got a call. The voice on the other end was emotionless, clinical. Be there by 10 p.m., no late arrivals. Follow the rules. I arrived just before 10. The park, named Everland, had been shut down for nearly 20 years. The Ferris wheel stood motionless, its rusted skeleton casting long shadows under the flickering floodlights. The roller coasters loomed like decayed metal serpents, their tracks broken in places, leading to nowhere. The entrance gates were chained shut, but I was given a key. I had the entire place to myself. My only task? Walk the perimeter every hour, check for trespassers, and report anything unusual. The first night was uneventful. The silence was unsettling, but I chalked it up to nerves. It wasn't until my third shift that things started to get wrong. It was 2:15 a.m. I was making my rounds near the old carousel when I heard it. Laughter. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. The sound of children giggling. I stopped in my tracks. The park was supposed to be abandoned. My first thought was trespassers, maybe some kids sneaking in for fun. I shone my flashlight around but saw nothing. The laughter continued, now shifting direction, moving toward the Ferris wheel. I followed the sound, my breath quickening. But as I reached the ride, the laughter stopped. Total silence. I stood there for a moment, then shook my head. Maybe I was imagining things. But then the Ferris wheel creaked. It moved, just an inch, just enough to make my stomach drop. I sprinted back to the security booth, locked the door, and sat in the chair, gripping my flashlight like a lifeline. I told myself it was the wind, but there was no wind that night. The next shift, I decided to investigate more. If kids were breaking in, I needed to find proof. At around 3 a.m., I wandered toward the old funhouse. The paint had peeled away from the walls, and the entrance hung open, swaying slightly. Inside, the mirrors were cracked, their reflections jagged and distorted. I stepped in cautiously, the wooden floor creaking beneath my weight. My flashlight flickered as I moved past the broken glass. Then I saw it, a reflection that wasn't mine. It was in the mirror directly in front of me, a tall, gaunt figure standing behind me. The second I turned around, it was gone. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering. But as I did, my flashlight flickered again. The bulbs above the mirrors buzzed to life, casting a dim, sickly glow. And then the mirrors, all of them, shuddered. And something whispered my name. I bolted out of there and didn't stop running until I was outside, gasping for air. I checked my watch. It was 3:12 a.m. I still had 3 hours left of my shift. By my fifth night, I was convinced something unnatural resided in Everland. I thought about quitting, but I needed the money. And deep down, I needed answers. At 2:45 a.m., I saw him. Near the old ticket booth, a man sat on a rusted bench facing away from me. He wore a dark suit, and his hands rested on his knees. "Hey," I called. "This park is private property. You can't be here." He didn't move. I approached slowly, my flashlight trembling in my grip. "Sir, you need to leave." Still, nothing. I stepped closer and reached out. The moment my hand hovered over his shoulder, he turned his head. Just his head. His body remained perfectly still, but his face twisted unnaturally to look at me. His eyes were black pits. No whites, no irises, just endless voids staring into me. His mouth stretched open, but no sound came out. I staggered backward, tripping over my own feet. When I looked up, he was gone. The bench was empty. I didn't finish my shift that night. I ran to my car, locked the doors, and waited until sunrise before driving away. I quit after that night. But before I left, I made one last mistake. I researched Everland. Turns out, the park didn't just shut down due to low attendance. Back in 1999, a ride malfunction killed a dozen people. The park tried to cover it up, but it was too late. Lawsuits piled up, and eventually, Everland closed its doors forever. One of the victims? A man in a black suit. Digging deeper, I found an old newspaper clipping. Among the victims was a man named Charles Leland, a former manager of Everland, who had been found sitting on that same rusted bench the night of the accident, his eyes wide open, mouth frozen in a silent scream. No official cause of death was determined. It's been months since I left, but I still have nightmares. Sometimes in my dreams I hear the laughter of children, and sometimes I see him, sitting on that rusted bench, waiting. We weren't supposed to be there. Hollow Pines Amusement Park had been abandoned for nearly 20 years, left to rot on the outskirts of town. But Jake had a thing for urban exploration, and I just wanted to impress him. "It's just an old amusement park," he grinned, waving the bolt cutters he'd brought along. "Come on, it'll be fun. We'll get some cool photos." I hesitated at the rusted gate, the once vibrant sign hanging at an angle, half its bulbs shattered. "Jake, are you sure? They shut this place down for a reason." "Yeah, because people got scared," he winked. "Don't tell me you believe in ghost stories." I didn't, at least not yet. We stepped onto the cracked pavement, our footsteps the only sound in the still night. The air smelled of rust and mildew. We wandered past empty food stands and crumbling ticket booths, snapping photos and joking nervously. Then we heard it, laughter. High-pitched, childish giggles drifting through the empty park. My blood turned to ice. There were no children here. Jake stiffened beside me. "You heard that, right?" I nodded. My fingers tightened around my phone. "We should leave." "Not yet." He pointed ahead. "Let's check out the carousel." The painted horses were faded, their once bright colors now chipped and peeling. The ride had been dead for decades. The machinery rusted, the music silenced, until it wasn't. The calliope started playing. A slow, haunting melody, warped and discordant. The carousel began to turn, the horses moving up and down, their lifeless eyes watching us. Then we saw them. Figures, children. Dozens of them riding the carousel, their faces obscured by the flickering lights. Some were laughing. Others just watched us. Jake took a step back. "This isn't right." One of the children turned toward us, a little girl with hollow black eyes. Her lips parted and a whisper crawled through the night air. "Help us." We ran. By 3 a.m., we were lost. The paths twisted in ways they shouldn't. The ride stood taller, looming over us like silent sentinels. My phone had no signal. Jake's was dead. Then the Ferris wheel lit up. "No," I breathed. "Clark's warning." Jake turned to me. "What warning?" "I read about this place," I admitted. "The old security guard. He always said, 'Don't go near the Ferris wheel after midnight.'" The wheel groaned to life, the rusted metal shrieking. And there, at the very top, we saw him. A tall man in a dark suit, motionless, staring down at us. Jake grabbed my wrist. "We have to go. Now." The walkie-talkie we'd brought for fun crackled. Not our voices, something else. "Get on." The Ferris wheel stopped, one empty carriage at the bottom, waiting. Jake yanked me away and we sprinted toward the exit. We reached the main gate, gasping for air. But when we got there, I felt my stomach drop. It was chained shut. We hadn't locked it. We hadn't touched it. But now the heavy chains coiled around the bars like they'd been there for years. Rust covered the locks. Something behind us whispered our names. We didn't turn around. At dawn, we finally found another way out, a gap in the fence near the overgrown bumper cars. Jake was pale, shaking. "We never talk about this again," I agreed. But later that night, I saw him sitting on his bed, staring at his phone. He'd been scrolling through the photos we took. "Don't look at those," I warned. "Just delete them." He didn't, and the next morning, Jake was gone. It's been weeks. The police found his car at the park entrance, but no sign of him. No footprints, no struggle. Last night, I woke up to the sound of a calliope playing.